Well, the very first thing I ever read by him was in an anthology put together by August Derleth, who published the first big book, Gentleman from Bear Creek. That wasn't a fancy book, but it's a great book of its type. No, it was The Black Stone, which was in, I forget which anthology by Derleth. But it wasn't until I got the omnibus collection from Arkham House, Skullface and others, that I read the opening and closing poems, that is lines written in the realization that I must die, and which will scarcely be understood. And I was immediately struck by the poetry for what it said, but also it was very well done. The thing about traditional poetry, written in traditional form, if there's something bad, it shows up immediately. The use of expletives when they're not, for example, I did know, just to make the rhyme was blow or glow or something else like that. But there's nothing wrong with inversions or that kind of, if that's what you want, but you don't use that just because you're so unskilled. You have to employ it just for the rhyme. But I noticed that he was an excellent craftsman. It wasn't until Always Comes Evening came out from Arkham House, Glenn Lord put it together, and he had gathered all the poems that had been published, or easily retrievable. And I thought that was it. I was struck by the craftsmanship and also by what he said. And I wouldn't mistake his poetry for that of anybody else. By the way, there is a kind of generic resemblance between Rudyard Kipling and Chesterton, between their poetry. The one major difference is that the strength of the emotions that Howard is projecting, I don't find that in Rudyard Kipling. I find wit, grace, interesting thing. In Chesterton, I never know half the time if he's kidding or is he for real. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you know, one tends to read more of those authors that you know they're not playing a game. So, but it wasn't until I saw this volume that I realized anybody that can have 700, 800 poems and they aren't everything that survived. I mean, yeah, it's everything, we don't know what else that might be. And also the level of craftsmanship. I would say yes, I'm not hedging. He's a major poet. The fact that he's not universally known, would Shakespeare be any the less great if we didn't all agree that he was great? You know, that's a tricky area. I was very encouraged by Larry, who's a completely honest man, and he's quite impressed. He didn't wait for a consensus of critical opinion and then he ventured out. For example, at this time in history, to say that John Milton is a great poet, or Alexander Pope, or Keats, Shelley, those other, Tennyson, you think you're being very dramatic or daring to say he's a great poet. Yes, he is, undoubtedly. And I would rather read him than many modern poets because too many of them, all they tell me about is the lint in their belly button. You took the words out of my mouth. And that impressed me, because Smith was a genuine person, as was Howard. See, but the problem is there was very little available by Howard, except what was published in Weird Tales and a few other magazines. I find it very, very moving, encouraging. It's too bad that Howard, you know, died feeling he was a failure. There were a number of factors. His mother, the care of his mother going to be dying, the fact that a novel in Price did not give him the emotional support when he absolutely needed it. When people come to you for shelter, don't give them intellectual arguments. Hug them. That's what they're looking for. And she didn't give. She was being difficult. And also the fact that Weird Tales owed him a big hunk of money. Farnsworth Wright, the editor, lived in a very nice Chicago apartment. And he died thinking he was a failure. And as we know, I think his life was eminently successful. He died at the age of 30? Wow. My life has been an idol compared to him. I think if he could have been clairvoyant, I think he would have been deeply moved.
Do you think in a different...
For example, it's recognition. It isn't so much that people want fame and fortune, but you want to be recognized by like-minded people, kindred spirits, so that what you've written is communication. And these people have read your stuff and they get it. That's pretty complicated way of getting to be known. God, there's so many writers in the United States at the moment. No, I think he would be very, I think he'd be very touched. And yes, there was a lot of violence in him, but as we know, anybody who could take care of his mother the way he did, there's a lot of tenderness there too. And I noticed, although men did not express themselves that way, he had a lot of tenderness for his best friends, who were men. Texans honor one of their own, who did not feel, I think he felt as though much of his life he was an outsider, which is not a nice feeling. The wholeheartedness of what he's doing. He absolutely believes in what he's doing, and he compels you to believe in it. That's, yeah, you either going to go along with the ride or you're not. There's no halfway measure. I wouldn't be so stupid as to resist such a wonderful invitation. Especially some of his prose tales are to die for. I don't say, how many works of fiction can I say that about? Howard compels belief. He's not half-hearted. I love that quality. There is a humor, sometimes rather grim. There is a humor, but it's not camp. Oh, I'm so clever, and there is irony, but it's used just enough to sort of moderate, alleviate, well, what is often pretty grim stuff. When I read anything by Howard, I would not mistake it for the writing of anybody else. And how much of the writing today could have been written interchangeably by any number of writers? And also what makes it worse is editors that try to then to force it. So where is the realm of self-expression? I don't know what to say. No, and I'm very grateful he doesn't write like anybody else. There's plenty of that kind of writing. And by the way, good academic writing is in its own class. I admire that. Anything well written, as Clark Ashton Smith says, books are either well written or badly written. That's it. Some, of course, are on a higher level than that. And I like things very full, vivid, rich. Like, you come, I'm going to make you a meal. I'm not going to make you some skimpy little sandwich. I'm going to make you a club sandwich. Or I'm going to give you this lavish feast. You know, it's going to be, you won't forget it. You know, I mean, I like that attitude. And again, it's this quality. He doesn't hold back. Given the fact that parts of Texas can be incredibly harsh at times, the weather can be violent, that helps me understand to some extent the violence latent in the people. I'm not saying this in any censorious way. Also the violence in him, as Larry points out, he confronted that. It's not something I care to confront in myself. Well, yeah, but I have savage moods, don't we all? One is certainly grateful that one does not give in to them, because you would be sorry, even if you could get away with it. Can you live with yourself afterwards? That's the criterion. Also, I don't want to be in jail. I was accidentally once in jail for swimming in a restricted area. an unused drinking, a reservoir. And I had very little money. I found out when you don't have much money, you stay away from the man.